everyone, my name is Reggie and today I'll be sharing with you my very incredibly belated December wrap-up. If you're new here, you should definitely hit that subscribe button. I post new bookish videos every Tuesday, and I also try to post videos other days in the week there, so hit that bell, dude, to be notified when I post new bookish content. So the first book I have to talk to you about is a book I gave 3 stars, and this was an audiobook. It was one of those like deal days from Audible, and this is called Gather Round the Sand by Paula Cole. This was a collection of short stories that had to do with gathering people around, gathering for Christmas time, short stories that didn't really even have anything to do with gathering. So some of these were short stories that were like based on news stories, some of these were short stories that were just based on classics, some of these were just short stories in their own right. I didn't necessarily like this that much. There was one book story that was fantastic. It was about elf letters, like letters that kids sent to the North Pole, essentially. But I listened to it around Christmas time. It definitely helped me get into the Christmas mood, so it wasn't all bad, and I gave it 3 stars. Next up, I have a book of modern poetry. This was The Sun and Her Flowers by Rupi Kaur. This was not as awful as her last book of poetry, Milk and Honey, which, I mean, I enjoyed when I read it, but also didn't at all. And yeah, I have some mixed feelings about modern day poetry. This was better, in my opinion, than her last one. I gave this 3.5 stars. I think it was a huge step up in terms of her work, but still for me, modern poetry, this kind of modern poetry we don't connect, it and I. I've read a couple modern poetry collections that I've loved and a couple that I've hated, but most of them just kind of fall in the middle for me, and this was just one of those. Next up, I read A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. And it was not as bad as I was worried it would be, not as great as I hoped it would be, and also very different than what I was expecting. The story was not at all any of the adaptations I had been fed. It was the same concept, but the exploration of it was very different. Like Scrooge like wisens up like by the first ghost. It's like weird, but I liked it. I gave it a 3.5 stars. I felt like it was a little boring and repetitive, but I really liked that it kind of threw me for a loop in that it was a little different than what I was expecting. Next up are a series of 5 stars because I loved a lot of the rest of the books I read. We have I'll Give You the Sun by J.D. Nelson. This is a contemporary book that is told in non-linear fashion, so it has a dual perspective and dual timeline. What happens in this book is we follow the older sister, Jude, while she is 16, I believe, and it's after something happens that separates siblings, and we follow Noah's story, the brother. I say older and younger. That's not true. They're twins. I don't know why I said that. I just say older because she's in the future, so we hear her story when she's 16 and his story when he's 13 or 12, but they're twins. So essentially what I mean by non-linear timeline is we hear Noah's story from when it was 12 before things changed between them, and we hear her story after things have changed between them when they're both 16. We don't know what happened between them, but they're in very different relationships with each other, and parts of their lives, things have really shifted in those years in between. So we're following the different stories going back and forth, trying to figure out what happened and if they'll come together again, etc., etc. It's very, very good. However, this has been praised as like one of the best books I've ever read by like everyone. So like it was definitely a 5 star for me, but I still felt kind of disappointed by it that it wasn't everything I kind of hoped it would be, but it was still beautifully written, beautifully executed. The end really just got me. I loved it. I would definitely reread this book. Next up, we have a 5 stars to Into the Bright Unknown by Ray Carson. This is the trilogy conclusion to Walk on Earth a Stranger, which is by my favorite author, one of my favorite series, a wonderful book. This story tells the tale of Leah Westfall, who is growing up during the time of the gold rush. The story starts and she is living in the South, but tragedy strikes and she is forced to flee west, and she ends up going to California, well, trying to get to California in search of gold. She has a secret ability, and that is that she can sense gold. So very valuable in the gold rush, but also puts a huge target on her back if anybody finds out about it. So she ends up disguising herself as a boy so that she can get across the country to California. The trilogy continues on from there, follows different adventures for Leah and her friends. I thought this was such a quality conclusion. Really enjoyed my entire time reading this trilogy, but this conclusion was really, really good. So 5 out of 5 stars. Next up, I have The Deal of a Lifetime by Frederick Bachman. This is a short story by Frederick Bachman, and this, I don't really want to tell you pretty much anything about it because it's such a short story. It will give everything away, but it was amazing and I loved it, and it's like 60 pages. Go read it. It's so good. It is set kind of during Christmas time, but I don't think it's one of those books set at Christmas that like will really get you in the mood for Christmas, or that you have to read at Christmas time. Like, you can read this book any time of the year. Technically, you can read any book any time of the year, but I really believe that like you should just read this book. Go read it right now. It's fine. 5 out of 5 stars. Not my favorite thing Frederick Bachman has written, but really, really good. I still loved it. And we have 2 more books that I read in the month of December. One made it onto my favorite books of 2017 and one made it into my honorable mentions. So you can click the I to see more information about both of these books. However, the first is Dear Martin by Nick Stone. This tells the story of an African-American teenage boy who finds himself in a run-in with the law and wrongfully arrested, and that has a profound effect on him, and he takes to writing to Martin Luther King Jr. in a experiment of like, what would Martin do in this situation. The story is just really good, really short, really profound, packs a punch, and this was one of my honorable mentions on my favorite books of 2017. However, the book that made it on the list of my favorite books of 2017 is Saga Volume 8. If you've fallen off the Saga train because it just wasn't packing the same punch as the beginning, hop back on and get to Volume 8. This was the best volume, in my opinion, that I've read in such a long time. I know a lot of people have disagreed with me on that, but a lot of people have agreed, so it's not like I'm the only one. It really got me in the feels. It was so emotional. I loved it so much. If you do not know, Saga is like the most popular graphic novel on BookTube, so I'm sure you know. But if you don't know, this is written by the iconic Brian K. Vaughan and illustrated by the amazing Fiona Staples. And this is a space opera of sorts, inspired roughly by Romeo and Juliet. So those are all of the books I read in December. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, comment down below, let me know if you've read any of these books that I read in December. I'd love to chat with you more about them in the comments down below. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye!
Baby, I'll be here.